Mankind likes to believe that there are no monsters, that we have always ruled the world. It is not so. The biggest problem with being dead is the smell. There are a lot of smells people associate with death. New death smells mostly like blood and feces. At least, it did in Jasmine's experience. Getting killed is not a dignified process. People tend to soil themselves once they breathe their last breath. Jasmine supposed both smells could be avoided if the victim used the bathroom first and the body wasn't opened up. But she'd never know for sure. Jasmine wasn't considerate enough to let her targets use the restroom, and leaving the flesh intact was out of the question. What could she say? A girl's gotta eat. Old Death was a more cloying, rotten scent, foulness and decay. Even a hint of a whiff would make a person's hackles rise. Instincts older than civilization perk up when you smell something dead. It was a real problem sometimes. New death was pretty easy to wash off. A shoulder and change was all Jasmine had to do. Old death was harder. Jasmine didn't really rot, not anymore, but old death lived in her skin and no amount of cleaning was getting rid of it. The good news was it was faint. You'd have to be close to pick up on it, even closer to smell it over the heady perfume Jasmine favored. Close enough to kiss. Jasmine looked pretty good for a dead girl. She had long dark hair, shiny and lustrous, big dark eyes, and full sensual lips. Her lips were blue, and her skin was paler than she'd like, but that was what makeup was for. Jasmine wore tight jeans and a tighter turtleneck. She wasn't a fan of turtlenecks normally, but it was necessary. She had to keep her neck covered, and none of the scarves she'd found were cute enough. A pair of white gloves completed the outfit. Jasmine gave herself one more worried sniff. Her hair smelled like lilacs. The death smell was still under there, but it wasn't too bad. She strolled up to the apartment building. Jasmine would never admit it out loud, but the apartment complex was the fanciest place she'd ever seen in person. It was a luxury high-rise. It wasn't just big and stylish. It was also highly secure. All the doors were access-controlled, and the doorman to boot. Jasmine had walked past the place 4 times, relying on the steady New York foot traffic to keep her from being noticed. Careful observation hadn't told her much, but she'd seen one well-dressed older lady use a key fob to get in, walking past the doorman with a friendly nod. Jasmine cursed herself. She hadn't thought to ask more questions when she got the keys and the address. Did the doorman know all the tenants? Would he stop Jasmine? The guy didn't have a gun, but a fancy place like this probably had armed security somewhere. More importantly, it would have cameras. A lot of cameras. Jasmine wasn't worried about the police tracking her down after the fact. She'd skip town once she got what she wanted. She wasn't even worried about being detained. She was a lot stronger dead than she'd ever been in life, and she didn't get tired. A lone man was not enough to restrain her, and no one was going to catch a woman who could maintain a full sprint forever. The problem was what would happen if she was stopped. Jasmine was on a mission of revenge, a vendetta so pure, a hatred so vast, death itself had not been able to contain it. Jasmine didn't remember the afterlife. There must have been one. If there wasn't life after death, she wouldn't have been able to come back. She didn't know what dark bargain she'd made to return to the world of the living, or what she'd made the bargain with. She wasn't even sure there was a bargain. Maybe she found a way back on her own, or maybe some great holy being had helped her, an angel or something. Yeah. Jasmine had been a nice person, no matter what anyone said about her. She had gone to heaven. Of course she had. It must have been heaven that sent her back. some outraged angel, blessing her with the chance to take the justice that had been denied for so long. Jasmine was an instrument of divine retribution. She had to be, right? Either way, being stopped at the door would be bad. The man she was hunting was not easy to reach. Jasmine had spent a whole week trying to find a way to get to him. His office was in a building so loaded with security that it might as well be Fort Knox. Jasmine hadn't dared loiter around or try to follow him directly. She'd been forced to stalk him on social media using the account of one of her previous victims. Jasmine was pretty sure the bastard didn't know what she'd done to the others, but he had the resources to protect himself, or worse, disappear forever. Jasmine's precious revenge would go up in smoke if he realized he was being hunted, which he definitely would if she didn't get him in the next few hours. She'd taken a big risk to get her hands on the keys to his condo. If she blew it now. Jasmine forced the thought away. Fear of failure would not help her. She squared her shoulders, put on her best sneer, and sauntered to the door with casual arrogance. She ignored the buzzer on the wall next to the door and pulled a key fob out of her pocket. She clicked the button and the door buzzed. Jasmine opened it. The doorman gave Jasmine a smile and a greeting. He gave a brief, almost involuntary glance at her body as she passed. Jasmine gave him a brisk nod and headed straight for the elevator, fancy briefcase in hand. When the elevator doors closed, she barely resisted the urge to sigh in relief. It was a ridiculous urge to have. Jasmine didn't even need to breathe. The elevator took her to the 41st floor, nowhere near the top of the building, but high enough. Jasmine wandered out into the luxurious hallway and counted door numbers until she found the one she wanted. She held a key card up to the reader above the door handle. The light turned green and the door opened. The condo was surprisingly clean, or maybe not surprisingly. The building probably had a cleaning service. The condo was spacious, with furniture that probably cost more money than Jasmine had seen in her whole life. Everything was white or light gray, with an exception of a pair of blue couch cushions. She got the sense that the man hadn't decorated it himself. There was one addition that looked out of place, a picture frame on an end table. The frame was some kind of polished wood. It looked expensive, but it didn't match the rest of the decor. The picture showed a man and a woman snuggling on a beach. It pissed Jasmine off. 5 years. Jasmine had been dead for 5 years. Her body had been found, but the cops hadn't found the men who murdered her, mostly because they hadn't looked very hard. Jasmine's killers had just moved on with their lives, like it never happened. All 4 of them finished college. They'd taken their degrees and started careers. 2 of them had stayed in Chicago. One had taken a cushy position at his dad's company. The other had started and bankrupted several businesses. Both of them had gotten married and had kids. Neither of them had been the slightest bit bothered about what they'd done. Not until Jasmine came calling, at least. The man Jasmine was waiting for moved back to New York. He, too, had been given a high-level executive position at his parents' company. He wasn't married, but he was in a serious relationship. Emily hadn't known what her boyfriend had done. She hadn't believed Jasmine when she told her. Emily had, however, believed the dating profiles Jasmine had shown her. Multiple profiles on multiple sites. The profiles were fake. Emily had made them herself. It was funny, really. Emily had refused to believe the very real things her man had actually done, but a 2-day-old Tinder profile had been accepted without question. People were stupid. Jasmine gave herself a quick tour of the place. There was a large bedroom with a massive bed and a second room that had been set up as an office. The bathroom was palatial. The bathtub was big enough for 4 people. A closer inspection revealed that it was a hot tub. Jasmine was tempted to try it out, but doing so would just depress her. Hot and cold didn't affect her the same way anymore. The kitchen was comparatively small. Marble countertops with a very nice-looking oven and dishwasher. The refrigerator had a touchscreen interface. It was all very nice, but the important thing was the large number of electrical outlets on the wall above the counter. Jasmine set her briefcase on the counter and opened it. She pulled out her prized possessions. Jasmine didn't own much. She'd come back to life with nothing but the rotted dress on her back. She'd been worried someone would call the police on her before she could find something to cover herself. She had no money, no ID, no one to turn to. Well, no one she was willing to turn to, at least. Jasmine had family and had a few close friends. She just didn't dare reach out to them. Jasmine's return was a temporary thing. She was pretty sure she'd die again the moment her revenge was complete. As much as she would have liked to see the people she loved one last time, it would only hurt them. Jasmine was dead. Her family had grieved her and moved on by now. She didn't want to reopen those wounds, and she certainly didn't want them to know what she'd come back to do. She couldn't go to them. It would be too cruel. Fortunately, Jasmine had come up with an alternative. She found a clothes store that was giving away free stuff to anyone that could outrun security. Now Jasmine had clothes, a little cash, and several credit cards whose former owners were too dead to miss them. The most important things she had were a laptop and a cell phone. The phone still had 10% of its battery, but the laptop was as dead as she was. She couldn't check into a hotel without ID, which made finding a place to recharge her stuff a real hassle. Jasmine plugged in the computer. She set her phone to charging as well. She checked the time. Her target wouldn't be off work for at least 2 more hours. Jasmine's first stop was the bathroom. She pulled a roll of duct tape out of her briefcase along the way. She removed and carefully folded her clothes, setting them in a neat pile on the countertop that contained the sink. There was a ring of mottled flesh around her neck, a reminder of how she'd died. Jasmine supposed she could count herself lucky. After 5 years in the ground, her body would have been rotted. Instead, she looked mostly fresh, like it had only been a few days. The holes in her torso were newer. The wife of her second victim had pulled a gun. Jasmine had 1 hole in her upper chest and 2 in her stomach. They didn't hurt. Jasmine didn't feel pain anymore. They did tend to leak, though. Jasmine didn't have a heartbeat, but she still had blood. The holes weren't big, but she hadn't found a good way to keep them closed. Duct tape was her current solution, but moving around meant the tape always came loose after a while. Jasmine took it off and put new patches in place. Her knuckles also needed to be wrapped in duct tape. Jasmine then pulled a different pair of gloves out of her briefcase. Black, leather. She put them on. Now that that was taken care of, Jasmine had nothing to do but wait. Jasmine hated waiting. The last few weeks had already had more waiting than she ever thought she'd have to endure, especially since she couldn't sleep. Jasmine smiled. This time would be different. She wouldn't be hiding or walking aimlessly around. She didn't have to dodge the police or try to avoid anyone's attention. There was a chance the building's security would come looking for her, but she didn't think it likely. She had privacy for once. Electricity. Best of all, she had TV. Jasmine's smile widened as she walked back into the living room. The television was bigger than she was, and it had surround sound. Jasmine hadn't watched TV since she died. She was only now realizing just how much she missed it. The next few hours passed all too quickly. Jasmine was almost disappointed when she heard the front door finally open. Her favorite show still had entire seasons that she hadn't seen. "Hey, babe." A man walked in. Tall, handsome, older than Jasmine remembered. He had sandy blonde hair that he kept short and neat. His eyes were brown. He wore a suit and tie, both of which looked tastefully expensive. "I thought you were studying tonight. Big test and all?" Jasmine allowed herself a small smile as she stood up off the couch. This was going to be good. "I was waiting for you," she said softly. "Oh, yeah?" There was a rustling as the man removed his suit jacket. Jasmine had turned off all the lights, but the television outlined her nude form. He noticed. "Oh, I guess you were." Jasmine turned to face him. She saw him freeze in the act of hanging his jacket, his brows furrowed. "Wait." Jasmine walked around the couch. She put a little extra sachet into her hips as she approached, angling to get between her target and the door to the condo. "You're not Emily," the man stated. What are you doing in my house?" "I'm an old friend." Jasmine smiled as she reached the door. She reached out and flicked the light switch. "Remember?" The man's eyes did not light up with recognition. He stared at her for a moment. Then his gaze moved up to her face. His frown deepened. Look, I don't know who you are, but you've got no idea who you're messing with. Jasmine's smile disappeared. He didn't remember her? Seriously? Oh, I know who you are, Brad. Are you sure you don't know me? She raised an eyebrow at him. I would have remembered. Brad was certain. Get out. You really don't remember? Jasmine moved closer. I certainly remember you. She took in a deep breath, drawing the man's attention lower. 5 years ago. A little party in the dorms. You, Jordan, Mikey, and Derek. And me. Brad snorted. We partied with a lot of girls. You're not special. Did you drug a lot of girls too? Jasmine asked. Pointed at her throat. Strangle them, maybe? Is that what this is about? Brad scowled. A shakedown? Look, bitch. Jasmine's fist smashed into his nose. It gave a satisfying crunch under her knuckles. Brad reeled back in surprise. Jasmine hit him again. She didn't know how to fight, not really, but she didn't need to. Her body was an order of magnitude stronger than when she'd been alive. Strong enough to flip a car over by herself. Strong enough that she had to hold back a little to avoid killing the man too soon, or damaging her hands more than she already had. She got several more hits in before Brad started to defend himself. He covered his head with his arms, so Jasmine hit him lower. Then he tried to snatch her wrists. He got one of them. He looked pissed, but not scared. Unacceptable. Jasmine's free hand latched onto his wrist in turn. He tried to wrestle her down to the floor. She let him. While he was doing that, she squeezed as hard as she could. Brad's wrist gave way with a sickening pop. The man cried out. Jasmine punched him again, then grabbed his other wrist. Another squeeze, another break. Brad cried out again. Jasmine went back to punching. The man curled in on himself, whimpering. He tried to cover his head out of reflex and nearly screamed when Jasmine pounded on his broken arms. She didn't stop. She kept hitting him until he stopped resisting. Jasmine eyed Brad critically. His face was a bloody mess. His eyes were open, but they were glassy. He was dazed, but not dead. She could see him breathing. Jasmine walked briskly back to her trusty briefcase. She came back with a pair of handcuffs and some leg shackles she picked up at an adult toy store. A ball gag, too. She rolled Brad over and cuffed his hands behind his back, making sure to tighten them as much as she could on his busted wrists. Brad started to come back to his senses while Jasmine was applying the leg shackles. They were basically just bigger versions of the handcuffs. He muttered something. Jasmine considered the ball gag in her hand. She set it down. Instead, she rolled Brad onto his back and straddled him. She saw him breathe in and get ready to yell. She clamped one hand over his mouth. The other hand dug into his Adam's apple. Try to scream, she warned, and I'll rip your throat out. Brad looked at her, eyes wide. She squeezed his throat a little harder, let her nails gouge into his skin a little. Do you understand? She asked, voice dangerously low. Brad's eyes were still wild, but he nodded. Jasmine kept her fingers on his throat, but she stopped covering his mouth. Who are you? He demanded. His tone was not as fearful as it should be. It was way more defiance than Jasmine expected from someone she'd just beat the snot out of and tied up. You really don't remember me? Jasmine tried to keep her voice low and scary, but she couldn't stop the outrage from leaking out into it. You drugged me, violated me, strangled me to death, and left me in a dumpster. A dumpster? Brad was still confused. 5 years ago, she reminded him. How could he not remember? Just how many girls had he and his frat buddies done that to? Good Lord. No wonder the angels had sent her to extract revenge. March 10th, the police found me 2 days later. 5 years, Brad repeated. March? He thought for a moment. The light of recognition finally flared up into his features. You're alive. No, Brad. Jasmine shook her head. I'm not alive. You killed me. Not alive? Brad looked confused again. But you're right here. But I'm not alive, Brad. Jasmine rolled her eyes. Maybe the guy wasn't a serial murderer. Maybe he was just stupid. The other two hadn't been this slow on the uptake. I crawled out of my grave to hunt down the people that killed me. He still looked confused. I'm a walking corpse, she clarified. Here for my murderers. But I didn't kill you, Brad protested. I didn't. Derek's the one who... I didn't know he was going to do that. But you took your turn, didn't you, Brad? Jasmine said quietly. You had your fun, then you watched him murder me. She leaned closer. You helped hide the body. Now, finally, Brad showed fear. It wasn't like that, he protested. We were kids. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. Jasmine's smile came back. It scared him even more. Wait, I've got money. I can give you whatever you want. He hesitated, licking his lips. Then he said, I can tell you where Derek is. I know where Derek is. Jasmine plucked the ball gag from the floor. And you're already giving me what I want. He tried to struggle, but she got it in his mouth anyway. She cinched it down. Then she grabbed his dress shirt and tore it open. Tender flesh was exposed. Jasmine had experienced few pleasures since she died. Even the most basic enjoyments of the living were denied her. Simple things like hot bath or cold drink. Jasmine didn't really feel hot and cold. She didn't feel lust either. Her reproductive system was as cold and dead as the rest of her. Jasmine could stretch her muscles or brush her hair or take a deep breath, but she felt nothing when she did those things. She couldn't even sleep. There was still one pleasure that Jasmine could indulge in. Hunger. Jasmine was always hungry now. It gnawed at her, growing worse and worse the longer she went without feeding. More importantly, the longer she went without the worse she started to smell. Jasmine had tried normal food. Then she tried ground meat, then a live squirrel. She'd thrown all of it right back up. There was only one thing her body craved, one thing that could satisfy her, one thing she could truly enjoy. Human flesh. What I want is you, Brad, Jasmine whispered. I want your flesh. I want your screams. Jasmine bent slowly, maintaining eye contact as long as she could. Brad watched her with fascinated horror. The dead girl opened her mouth, letting her teeth gently graze the skin of her prey. She took in the scent of his skin, his fear. She could see his pulse, sense the hot blood running through his veins. It made her mouth water. I want you to suffer like I did. Jasmine bit down. She tore a chunk out of Brad. He tried to scream, but the gag reduced it to a muffled squeal. Glorious. Hot blood dribbled down her mouth as she chewed. The flesh was sweet and savory and coppery and warm. So warm. Feeding was the only time Jasmine felt real heat. It made her feel so good, almost alive. It may be the best thing she's ever felt. It was certainly the best thing she'd ever tasted. She wanted more. She needed more. One thing first. Even with the gag, Brad was making a lot of noise. Maybe it wasn't a good idea to eat him right next to the front door. Jasmine stood up, hoisting the man over her shoulder. She took him to the bedroom and dumped him on his ridiculous oversized mattress. She took a moment to enjoy the tears streaming down her murderer's face. Oh, a realization hit her. I almost forgot. Wait here a sec. Jasmine started out of the room, then thought better of it. Brad was bound, but that didn't mean he couldn't cause trouble if she left him alone. After a moment's consideration, she grabbed his ankle with both hands just above the leg cuffs. It gave a satisfying snap. She did the other leg too. Then she wandered out into the kitchen. Her phone was almost charged. She took it. She had to grab a stylus too. Touch screens work by detecting temperature changes, and she was the same temperature as the room. Jasmine used the stylus to unlock her phone and pull up a picture. Hey, Brad, Jasmine called. The man was still on the bed, whimpering. Do you want to know how I got in here? Brad looked over at her, still blubbering into his ball gag. Emily gave me the keys, Jasmine told him. She held up the phone for him to see. The phone showed Brad's girlfriend, stuffed into her own refrigerator. She was folded up at an unnatural angle and very, very dead. There was a fair amount of blood, but Jasmine had made sure the girl's face was clean and easy to see. Brad didn't react like she'd hoped. He just stared for a moment, still trying to scream. Jasmine shook her head. You really are a disappointment, Brad. She'd had better reactions from Jordan and Mikey when they'd found out she'd killed their girls. Much better. Maybe Brad didn't care about Emily that much. Or maybe he was in too much pain to give the loss the attention it deserved. Either way, Jasmine felt like her effort had been wasted. Jasmine put the phone back on the charger. She came back to find that Brad had managed to roll off the bed. He wasn't going to get far with all his limbs broken and handcuffed, but he was trying. Jasmine watched him squirm for a minute, then picked him up and tossed him back on the bed. Just relax, Brad, the dead girl purred. I'm going to eat you slow. I'm really going to take my time. She tore open the bottom of his slacks and took a small chunk out of his calf. Brad squealed. Jasmine shuddered in ecstasy as she swallowed the meat. Who knows? Maybe you'll last all night. Jasmine grinned at the crying man. Her grin widened as her eyes caught the television mounted on the wall. She left Brad to his whimpering as she hunted up the remote control. Dinner and a show. What more could a girl ask for?